your car battery is dying earlier than it should. And most of the time, it is not because of the name on the label. This is where people lose money fast. A battery dies without warning, you panic, you buy the cheapest replacement with a familiar brand name, and you assume the problem is solved. Then, a year later, the car cranks slow again, the lights dip at idle, and now you are paying $200 to $350 all over again for a battery that was never the right choice in the first place. Here is what most drivers do not realize. Brand alone means almost nothing if you buy the wrong tier, the wrong size, or put that battery into a car with hidden power draw, short trip charging, or weak alternator. In this video, I'll show you 5 battery brands to avoid, 7 that actually last, and the 4 silent battery killers that destroy even good batteries long before they should fail. Quick disclaimer before we start, the tips and guides in this video are for educational purposes only. Every vehicle is different, so please use this information at your own risk. We are not responsible for any damage or injury that may occur. When in doubt, always consult a professional mechanic. Most drivers think a battery failure means one simple thing: bad brand. So they blame Exide, Diehard, Everstart, or whatever name is on the case, then go buy a different label and hope the next one lasts longer. That sounds logical. It is also where a lot of people get trapped, because the real mistake usually is not just which brand they bought. It is that they bought the wrong version of that brand, the wrong battery tier, or a battery that was never a good match for a modern car full of modules, sensors, screens, and constant background power draw. And stores do not always help. In an emergency, people buy whatever is in stock, whatever is cheapest, or whatever sounds familiar. That is how you end up with a battery that was already set up to lose. So no, this is not just a story about good brands and bad brands. It is about why some batteries survive 5 to 8 years while others die early, even with a famous name on top. And once you see what is actually happening, the whole battery aisle starts to look very different. Here's what's actually happening. Your battery is usually not dying because the logo on top is cursed. It is dying because modern cars are quietly harder on batteries than most drivers realize. Even when the car is off, there is still a small but constant power draw from modules, security systems, memory settings, sensors, and screens. That is normal. But if the battery is a low-tier flooded unit, slightly underpowered for the vehicle, or already losing capacity, that silent drain starts eating into its reserve fast. Now add short trips. The car starts, which takes a big bite out of the battery, then the alternator only gets a few minutes to put that energy back. Do that over and over, and the battery lives in a half-charged state. That is where damage starts. The plate sulfate usable capacity drops, and now the battery that looked fine on paper begins cranking slower every morning. Then comes the part most people miss. Once capacity drops, the whole system gets stressed. A weak battery makes the alternator work harder. A weak alternator leaves the battery undercharged. Heat makes both problems worse. So what started as a small mismatch becomes a chain reaction. Undercharge leads to capacity loss. Capacity loss leads to slow cranking. And slow cranking leads to an expensive panic replacement that may not solve the real issue. Think of it like using a small phone battery to run a laptop. It may work for a while, but it was never built for that load. This is how a small battery problem turns into an expensive one. At first, it just feels annoying. The engine cranks a little slower. Maybe the car struggles one cold morning. Maybe the lights dip slightly at idle. Most drivers ignore that stage because the car still starts. But that is exactly where the money starts leaking out. A weak or undercharged battery forces the charging system to work harder every day. If that goes on long enough, people start chasing the wrong culprit. They replace the battery too early, then the starter, then sometimes even the alternator, because nobody stopped to ask what caused the battery to fall behind in the first place. And battery failure is never just about the part cost. A replacement battery can run $200 to $350 fast. Add installation, diagnostic fees, towing, or missing work because the car will not start. And that simple battery issue suddenly becomes a $400 problem or more. The most expensive part is usually not the battery. It is the panic, the misdiagnosis, and the habit of replacing parts before checking what actually failed. But the part most people miss is this. The best battery in the world will still die early if the car is quietly killing it. That is the trap. People argue about brands, but the real savings usually happen before you buy anything. Because if you skip the simple checks first, you can blame the wrong battery, replace the wrong part, and spend the same $200 to $350 all over again. So before we get into the 5 battery brands to avoid and the 7 that actually last, you need a smarter filter. And this is where the real difference starts. So here is the smarter way to buy a battery without getting ripped off. First, test the car before you blame the battery. This is the cheapest step, and it is where the biggest savings happen. Most drivers wait until the car barely starts, then they assume the battery is dead because that is the most visible part in the system. But a battery can look guilty when the real problem is corrosion, weak charging, or a battery that just has not been fully recharged in weeks. Start with the free stuff. Look at the terminals. If you see white, green, or crusty buildup, clean that first. Corrosion adds resistance, and resistance makes a normal battery act weak. Then get a free load test at a place like AutoZone, O'Reilly, or Walmart. That matters more than a simple voltage reading because voltage can look okay while real cranking power is already falling off. Then, if you have a multimeter, check alternator output. You want roughly 12.6 volts at rest and around 13.7 to 14.7 volts running. This is the part most people skip, and this is where people waste money. If those 3 checks pass, you may not need a new battery at all. You may just need a full charge cycle and a better maintenance routine. That is the cheap test to do before you spend $200 to $350 on the wrong fix. Second, stop buying a battery by name. Buy by tier, type, and fit. This is the mistake that keeps repeating. Someone says, just buy an Interstate or just get a diehard, as if every battery under that label is built the same. It is not. A brand can sell an entry-level flooded battery, a mid-tier upgrade, and a premium AGM line that behave like completely different products. What actually matters is whether the battery matches the car's electrical demand. A modern SUV, start-stop sedan, or anything loaded with screens, modules, cameras, and sensors is much harder on a battery than an older basic commuter. Put a bargain-flooded battery into a car that really wants an AGM, and you are setting up an early failure even if the logo sounds trustworthy. This is also where people get upsold in both directions. Some shops sell you a premium battery you do not need. Other times, emergency buyers underspend and get a battery that was never enough for the car. The smarter move is simpler. Match the group size, meet or exceed the required CCA, and choose the right battery type for how the car is actually used. Brand matters, but fit and tier matter first. Third, be careful with the 5 battery names people trust too easily. Now, let's make this practical. When I say avoid these 5, I do not mean every battery that company has ever made is junk. I mean, these are the names people most often buy blindly, and that is what gets them burned. Be careful with Exide, especially when you are staring at a low-cost emergency replacement. Be careful with lower-tier diehard lines bought only for the old name. Be careful with bargain-level Everstart versions that people grab because they are on the shelf right now. Be careful with Optima if you are paying for old reputation instead of current value. And be very careful with no-name private label batteries that look cheap up front and expensive a year later. Why do these end up on the wrong side of the list so often? Because most drivers are not comparing the exact line, the build tier, the warranty, the fresh manufacturing date, or whether the battery is even right for their car. They are buying a label under pressure. That is how mediocre batteries keep getting sold as good brands. So the rule is not never buy these names. The rule is never trust the name alone, especially when you are stranded in a hurry and the store only has one close enough option left. Fourth, here are the battery lines that actually make sense if you want longevity. If your goal is 5 to 8 years, not just get me home today, this is where the real separation happens. The better choices tend to be higher tier batteries with stronger reserve capacity, better build quality, and better tolerance for today's electrical loads. Lines worth serious attention include Interstate AGM, Diehard Platinum AGM, Odyssey, X, 2-Power Premium AGM, Bosch AGM, AC Delco Gold or AGM, and better store options like Everstart Max or Everstart Platinum AGM when the specs match the vehicle. The common thread is not magic branding. It is that these are usually the lines where you are buying more real battery, not just more marketing. And that matters because a stronger battery does not just start the car better. It recovers better from short trips, tolerates hidden power draw better, and gives you more margin before a cold morning turns into a no start. That margin is everything. But here is the warning. Even the better batteries will disappoint you if you buy old stock, wrong fitment, or the wrong type for the car. So when you shop, check the date code, verify the group size, and do not let close enough talk you into the wrong case size or weaker spec. That is the surface level buying fix. Now here is where the real savings happen. Fifth, protect the battery you buy from the 4 silent killers, because even a good battery will die early if you leave these 4 problems untouched. The first killer is short trips. Starting the car takes a big chunk of energy. If you only drive 10 minutes at a time, the alternator may never fully pay that energy back. Leave that pattern going long enough, and the battery lives half charged. That is where capacity starts to fall. The second killer is hidden parasitic draw. Modern cars never really go fully asleep. Some draw is normal, too much is not. If the car sits for days at a time, especially with extra electronics, dash cams, or aftermarket accessories, a mid-tier battery can get drained over and over without you noticing. The third killer is heat. Heat ages batteries fast. This is why a battery that might survive years in a mild climate can die much sooner in Arizona, Texas, or Florida. And the fourth killer is a weak alternator, or poor charging pattern. If the alternator is undercharging, the battery spends its life behind schedule. That works for a while, then one morning it doesn't. This is the part that only works if you catch it early. If the battery is under 5 years old, the alternator is healthy, and the battery passes a load test, correcting these habits can absolutely buy you more life. But if the battery is already 7 years old, has been deeply discharged multiple times, or has a swollen case, you are past the cheap fix stage. So the real method is this. Test first. Buy by tier and fit. Avoid blind trust in big names. Choose stronger lines when the car demands it, and then stop the 4 silent killers from murdering the next battery too. So up to this point, you can already see the real pattern. Most battery money gets wasted before the right diagnosis ever happens. It is not just about a bad brand. It is about wrong tier, wrong fit, and the 4 silent killers that shorten battery life no matter what name is printed on the case. But none of that helps if you miss the next part. Because there are still a few battery myths that sound smart, feel logical, and keep people replacing batteries too early or worse, trusting a battery that is already past the point where the cheap fix can save it. Now let's clear out the battery myths that keep people spending money the wrong way. The first myth is just buy the biggest battery you can fit. That sounds smart because more power feels safer. But bigger numbers do not automatically mean better results. If the battery does not match the car's required group size, hold down, terminal layout, or charging strategy, you can create new problems while thinking you upgraded. The second myth is if the car still starts, the battery is fine. Not true. A battery can be weak for months before it becomes dead. That is why so many drivers get fooled by 1 slow crank, 1 jump start, then 2 quiet weeks, and suddenly no start in a parking lot. Starting is not proof of health. It is just proof that today was not the day it failed completely. The third myth is AGM fixes everything. AGM is often the better choice for modern cars, start-stop systems, and heavier electronic loads, but it is not magic. If the alternator is weak, the car sits too long, or there is hidden parasitic draw, even a premium AGM can die early. A better battery helps. It does not erase a bad charging environment. And here is the important line. This method works best when the battery is still in the recoverable stage, usually under 5 years old, passing a load test, and not badly damaged. It only helps a little when the battery is already 5 to 7 years old, heat-stressed, or slowly losing reserve capacity. And it will not fix the problem anymore when the case is swollen, the battery keeps needing jumps, it fails a load test, or it has spent weeks deeply discharged. That is the difference between extending battery life and trying to save a battery that is already finished. So, here is the simplest way to make the call. Fix now. If the engine is cranking slower than normal, the battery warning light is on, the headlights dim at idle, the case is swollen, the terminals are badly corroded, or the battery fails a load test. Same answer if the car has needed more than one jump in the last 60 days. At that point, do not keep gambling. Test the charging system, confirm fitment, and replace the battery with the right tier, not just the closest one on the shelf. Monitor if the battery is around 4 to 5 years old, still passes a load test, but you are seeing an occasional slow crank, minor terminal corrosion, or the car sits unused for 5 to 10 days at a time. This is the stage where cleaning the terminals, fully charging the battery, checking alternator output, and paying attention to driving habits can still buy you time. Ignore for now, or more accurately, don't spend yet if the battery is under 3 years old, starts the car cleanly every day, and load test numbers are strong. In that case, do not let fear or upsell logic talk you into replacing a battery that is still doing its job. So here is the simplest battery plan to follow from this point forward. First, inspect the battery you already have. Check for corrosion, a swollen case, loose terminals, or obvious age. If the battery is over 7 years old, stop pretending a miracle fix is coming. Then, get a real load test, not just a quick opinion. A proper test tells you whether the battery still has real cranking power left. If the battery passes, check the charging system next. Measure voltage at rest, and while the engine is running. If the alternator is weak, replacing the battery first is just treating the symptom. Recheck how the car is actually used. Lots of short trips, long parking periods, hot climate, or extra electronics can kill a decent battery early. That means your next battery choice needs to match the car's real demand, not just your budget in the moment. Don't buy by brand name alone. Buy the correct group, size, enough CCA, and the right type, especially if the car really needs AGM. And only move to the expensive option if the battery fails the load test, keeps needing jumps, or the charging system has already been confirmed good. The big takeaway is simple. Expensive repairs usually begin as small, ignored problems. A battery almost never feels dramatic at first. It gives you little hints, a slow crank, dim lights, one weak morning, and most people wait until those hints turn into a tow, a missed appointment, or another rushed purchase they did not really think through. That is how small battery problems become wasted money. But once you understand what actually matters, you stop shopping like a panicked customer and start thinking like a smart owner. You know when to test first, when to monitor, and when it is finally time to replace the battery without guessing. And that is really what this channel is about. Spend less, fix smarter, avoid preventable damage, and keep the car longer by understanding the parts most people ignore until they fail. If this helped you look at car batteries a little smarter, subscribe for more videos that help you spend less, fix smarter, and avoid the repairs most drivers never see coming. And if you want, watch the next video because battery problems are only one part of how cars quietly drain your money when you miss the real cause. Every script, edit, and voiceover on this channel is crafted with real human expertise, not mass-produced content. If this helped you, subscribe for more.